And hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Business Fusion. I am Philip de la Vega, your host, with my co-host, Carlos Raldiris. And today we have a special guest. Who do we have, Carlos?
Well, our guest can see him. It's Jayson Yardley. Just give you a little background on Jayson. So Jayson and I work together in the healthcare industry and have kind of stayed in touch over the last several years. By way of a very brief introduction, but we'll let him, speak for himself. Jayson is a accomplished executive. He's a CEO. He's an author. So we're excited about that as well. And right now he is the CEO of RSource, a revenue cycle management company. And welcome, Jayson.
Welcome. Thank you. Hi, Carlos. Hi, Philip. Certainly, thank you for having me on the Business Fusion podcast. It's really a pleasure to be here with you guys. So thanks.
Terrific. Well, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit more, maybe talk a little bit more about RSource and the kind of work that you do there.
Yeah, you got it. So born and raised in Los Angeles in Orange County, Southern California. I have a wonderful opportunity to live in Newport Beach right now with my wife and two teenage young adults. I went to college here in Los Angeles. I went to UCLA and then received my MBA from Cal State University Pomona, or Cal Poly Pomona. And I just mentioned that because that's really actually where my healthcare career started. So while I was an undergraduate at UCLA, I needed a job and needed some money and went to work at the local hospital as a registrar or an admissions clerk in the emergency room. So if you really want to crash course, no pun intended, in healthcare and hospitals, work in the emergency room for a while. So during my college years, I worked for hospitals. I worked for various billing and follow-up vendors along the way. And then after college, I spent 10 years in consulting. So I worked for Ernst & Young, Capgemini, and Navigant Consulting, which is now Guidehouse. Had a great consulting career and started to see, I was all focused on healthcare, all focused on what's referred to as the revenue cycle of healthcare. So that's all of the admitting, all the medical records, revenue integrity, billing, and follow-up kind of functions. That whole thing is referred to as revenue cycle. So my whole career has been focused on that. And towards the end of my consulting career, I started to see there was much more of a trend going on towards outsourcing on the business side of healthcare. And so I left consulting to join the outsourcing ranks. And from there, I've had the opportunity to be senior vice president and CEO of 4 different companies. I currently work for a company called RSource, where I'm the CEO at RSource. RSource is private equity owned. Previously had an amazing founder who I'm very lucky to have had the opportunity to transition from. And I just have a remarkable executive team and management team. So I feel very lucky and blessed being here at RSource. At RSource itself, so we help hospitals and health systems win the claims game. So if you can picture hospitals and health systems billing insurance companies and getting remittance or not. So whenever insurance companies might deny claims, maybe for clinical reasons or for coordination of benefit reasons, we're there to support and help hospitals get those claims paid. We also are there to help them with their billing around what gets referred to as complex claims. So things like motor vehicle accidents and workers' compensation claims. We have a specialty in Veterans Administration. We even focus a lot on low balance claims. So you can kind of think of it as a technology-enabled services company. We help or allow hospitals to really focus on their core accounts while we provide those specialized resources to help them with some of the more challenging ones where maybe they need a nurse or a doctor or an attorney or specialized resources to help get paid on those. That's where we fit in. And we're a very remote company. We were remote before COVID made remote cool, meaning I have team members in 43 states, and I have clients in 37 states. So we service over 340 hospitals and health systems all around the country.
Wow, that is fantastic, Jayson. Really, you've touched on so many points, and I do have someone very close to me that works in the ER, and I hear stories all the time. And you're right, it is a great area where you want to get like a lot of experience for sure. Look, well, we're interviewing Jayson today as part of our leadership series. And with all the vast experience that you do have and all the different roles, and now explicitly, as you mentioned, doing this remotely, we like to cover how do you create alignment in your organization, right? Because It's not just the breadth of number of people, but now you're doing it remotely. That's very different nowadays. How do you do that?
It is, and it's something that I believe you have to be very purposeful around in how you create alignment and what that means. So for me, alignment really starts with a vision, but it comes to life through communication. So it's interesting. Literally yesterday, I was asked by somebody, and so they said, you're a CEO, so what do you do? And don't tell me you're a CEO. What do you do? And I said, well, my answer is that I am chief storyteller and experience creator. That's really what some of the main things that I do. And I believe that that's true. I work with our private equity owners. I work with our board of directors, our executive team, our management team, all to build a vision for the company and then create the appropriate narrative and the stories for all of the various parties and stakeholders and constituents that we have to communicate and get alignment around what that vision is. As I think back to my career and the path that I've been on, there's a few actual books and things that I've focused on along the way. There's a couple of books by a gentleman by the name of Paul Smith. One's Lead with a Story, one's Sell with a Story. Helps create kind of a thought process around how do you even create a story that makes sense? What are the types of stories as a leader that you should have in your back pocket? Like the story of how your company got created, the story of how you create value and whatever your market or location is, all those great kind of stories that you need to be able to have. And then there's someone else by the name of Joseph Campbell, and way back in the 40s, I think it was, he wrote a book called A Hero with a Thousand Faces. And in that book, he describes how most stories follow the same kind of format, meaning if you look back to anywhere to the original myths from the Greek legends to Star Wars, they follow a very similar format of a hero who goes through a problem, who then is down on their luck and finds a guide, and the guide helps them, and they have this big challenge, and they overcome the challenge, and then they create sort of a whole new environment, and they're able to communicate that. That was a very abbreviated version of that. But what it really helped me is to think about how do you put together the right stories and the right communication to create alignment. And then once you have that together, being very structured and purposeful in how it gets communicated. So for large transitions or large changes, I have a communications template then that I follow. It speaks to who the audience and the stakeholders are that we're communicating with. What's the message that they really need to receive in this communication? The channels, how are we going to communicate? Is this something that's online or in person, and the timing and the frequency? So create a vision, communicate that vision, and then lastly, I would say walk the walk. Mm-hmm. So setting goals for teams, holding teams accountable for achieving those goals, but at the same time, giving them the tools to be successful. And then model the behavior that you want to see in the organization. We all have an ability to sniff out when someone or something is disingenuous or not following, what they've said. And that's the best way to kill alignment. So come up with that vision, communicate it, do all the right things, and then follow through on what you're saying.
So talk to us a little bit about how, does the model change or the approach that you use change for different constituencies? And if it remains the same, are there some things that you find work better, for example, with employees versus managers versus clients versus board members? Fill us in on that.
I'll never forget, through consulting, I love my consulting experience, but the teams just often weren't all that large. When I moved into outsourcing, I'll never forget walking into my first business office, and there's 50 or 60 people in the business office that now report to me. And I come busting through the door, and everybody turns and looked at me, and I have this immediate moment of fear of, why in the world are these people going to follow anything that I have to say? What just changed because I walked through the door? And how do you address all that, right? What's the right communication? How do you set vision? How do you do all these types of things? And that was one of the, fear is a great motivator. So that's one of the things that set me off to really being maybe a bit of a management theory nerd and doing research and trying to figure this out. And so I spent a lot of time in my career thinking about leadership and thinking about management. I think I would subscribe. I'm a pretty big follower of some of the Patrick Lencioni theories that, the 5 dysfunctions of a team and those sorts of things. And my biggest takeaway from all of that is that all relationships, whether it's in business or it is personal, all start with this foundation of trust. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have trust, then you've got nothing to really build from as you're trying to create that alignment and you're trying to get people to follow what would you like them to do. And then once you have trust, you can have difficult conversations. You can create teams that grow together and achieve great things. So whether I'm engaging with a board or internally or with a client, I've also found a lot of my communication ends up going to the topic of value, right? Boards want to know how are you creating value in the company or in the business? People inside the company want to know, well, what value are you creating for them? Is it career growth? Is it financial or wage growth? Is it education? Is it skill sets? Is it mentorship? Where is the value that's come to them? And then lastly, clients want to know, well, what value are you going to bring me, right? What, is it technology? Is it, once you, in our case, help us collect more money and you subtract out their fee, what at the end of the day is the value that's left. So it's really, especially in a technology-enabled services type of environment, it's very much show me the money, and then describe that value to me. But at the end of the day, and the reason why I kind of started that with the Patrick Lencioni piece is, even with all of those great stories, being able to describe value, go through all of that, we all at the end ask the same question, which is, do I trust that person can deliver? And it all really goes back to trust and relationships, no matter kind of what level that was that I described.
And I know of leaders sometimes that tell the story, but they're not 100% connecting with the audience, right? So sometimes, and I've been in this role before, but I tell the story, I share the message or the direction, and I've done the job, but am I connecting with my constituents and the team? Have you gone through that? Have you experienced that?
Yeah, absolutely. Also, it depends a lot on the message too, right? I've had times where, from an outsourcing perspective, I've sat in the big amphitheater and had to tell people we're making a change with 100 people in this room, and there is no way to connect on that message of what someone's hearing. And then I've had the opportunity to share wonderful, exciting news with people and connect with them, as well. And it's, then layer in these past 2 years, we've all had this front row seat to, what can make the world turn upside down and give us expectations that we weren't anticipating at all. And so, yeah, there have definitely been times that the message has been difficult. One of my big takeaways in my career, I think, has also come from that. And it's something, it's like my executive team was here. I'm sure that somebody out there listening to this would be shaking their head agreeing with this, is I often bring up the concept of unintended consequences, which is you can have the best of intentions. You can make exactly what you think is the best decision. And until you have really gone through the effort to try and put yourself in the shoes of those that you're communicating with, you can really have some unintended consequences of what you're communicating or what the outcome is, even with all of the best planning, prep, decisions, everything else. Right. And so, yeah, Philip, I've definitely sat in a room where you roll something out and then somebody goes, well, what about this? And you all kind of look at each other like, oh man, I really wish we would have thought about what about that going through it. And nobody's perfect. And we're all just people at the end of the day.
One of the challenges that many leaders sometimes have is getting the organization to follow your strategic direction, having this engagement, right, on the direction you want to go. But at the same time, because at the top, you make the decisions, the buck stops with you, whether it is the private equity group, whether it is the board of directors, family office, whomever, you have to deliver some metrics. At the end of the day, it is a business, right? How do you balance that? Or what has been your experience in trying to do that? Or, just share that with us.
Well, going back to establishing that vision ultimately has to be made concrete, right? At some point, you have to take we want to go from point A to point B, and you have to get down to eventually what the numbers are, or what the measurement's going to be around that thing. So whether it's through establishing the high level goals and objectives for the company, and then rolling that down literally level by level inside the organization. Yeah, I truly believe all of us want to know how we're performing, no matter where we are in an organization. And the best way to share with somebody how they're performing is if there's a way to measure it. So you make things as objective as you can along the way. So if I say, look, I want to grow revenue by X% and I want to grow our bottom line by X%, and then I work with each of my executive team members to say, okay, so what does that mean in sales? What does that mean in people and culture? What does that mean in finance? What does that mean in operations and client services, each of the areas? Because then you got to break down what that vision is and make it rational for each of those groups, and then helping them to then turn around and go down to either their next level of management or to their staff and try and address that question, which all of us go through, which is, what does this mean for me? How am I going to be measured? When am I going to be measured? What does success look like? All right. I'm sure probably many of us have heard this, the story of making your room, where in order to show what good looks like, a mother says to their child, hey, I need you to go clean up your room. And the child goes and cleans up their room, and the mom later goes and checks on the room. And it's not at all what the mom intended for a clean room to look like. So the mom cleans the room and takes a picture and puts it on the wall and says, this is what good looks like. You've got to be able to communicate really clearly what your expectations are and ultimately what does good look like. And if you can't paint that picture and you can't make it measurable, you're never going to be aligned in where you want to get and how you're going to get there and how fast you're going to get there.
Right.
Once you get past the excitement of the original story or the idea or the vision or the mission, we can get a bit worn down, if you will, by the reality, right? That, back to the point that I think Philip was kind of alluding to. You still got to meet the numbers, so to speak, and sometimes that's within our control, and sometimes it's not within our control, and there's nothing like a bad quarter, for example, to really put a question mark around the original story. My question is really about when it's the story's been told and people are on the path, and you begin to see that maybe it's not working out the way that you envision. How do you keep people on track? How do you keep them aligned, if you will, around the story, around the mission, around the thing that you're trying to get everybody to achieve?
So at the end of the day, for me, it's really about trying to put yourself in the shoes of your teams and continuing to readdress what that messaging is. The Cleveland Clinic years ago put out this really great video, and it starts with a quote from Henry David Thoreau. It's on the line along the lines of, could a greater miracle take place than for us to look through each other's eyes for an instant? And what that really means to me is, it's this incredible video of vignettes of doctors and nurses and patients and things in the hospital. And as it goes through its journey, there's little pop-ups next to each of these people. And it says things like, the tumor was benign, or the tumor was cancerous. Just found out that they were pregnant, will be the last time that they see their parent. And it really makes you stop and think, if you knew what was going on in that individual's life, would you somehow treat them differently than maybe how you're treating them right now? And for me, it gets back to, once again, just trying to put yourself in the shoes of your teams and of the people that you're responsible to. And I don't mean responsible to in terms of a board. I mean the entire organization, that I feel in my role as a CEO, that I'm responsible to everyone in helping everyone to move along with this. And many of the examples that I just gave are things that are rooted in fear or rooted in change, that often takes people off of course of the mission or where we're headed. And while it's impossible for me in my role to know what's going on with everyone, it's very possible for me to stop and think about the communications and the way things are heard, and how to get people sort of back on mission, or how to continue everybody on that mission. So it can be everything from empathy and understanding. It can be how regular we're communicating, the consistency of those messages. It can be about changing the way that we communicate. So if emails aren't working. Should we be doing town halls? When I had call centers, we put up monitors in the call centers so we could continuously be repeating the message over and over again. And ultimately, if your messaging isn't working, do you just need to revisit the message? Were you just off base? And the one that I know that we just simply, I would say, I think, don't do enough of, which is ask for feedback from the teams, listen, and then do what should be the easiest, but often is a part that just gets dropped, which is then do something about it. If you're going to open up the door and ask for people's feedback, document it and do something about it. In a fully remote business, my example is we're not all in the same office. So I can't have an open door policy, but I have an open email policy. So anybody in the company can email me about any topic. And it's great because I'll get an email about someone's just has a new grandchild. I'll get an email about the unintended consequences of maybe a decision that we made that I need to rethink about. And, it runs the gamut of all the types of things that I, as a leader, then have the opportunity to really understand better about our business. And I also love the shock that I get to create when I respond to every one of them. And somebody goes, "Oh my God, the CEO just responded to my email." There's a voice on the other end of this, which is great. So, Carlos, there's a lot that goes into trying to keep the ship headed in the right direction and continue with that messaging and keep people aligned.
Share with us a little more on the cadence of communication. I know you just mentioned email, and that is fantastic. But is there a different cadence that you're exercising right now and communicating with your leadership team?
So I have a certain regular cadence with my team. I have a cadence that I encourage with them to have with their teams. And then I have the cadence around how I communicate with the entire company. So I bring them together, my executive team together once a week so that we can all hear the important messages and be together. I have one-on-ones with each of my executive team members once a week. And I have an ongoing list. So using technology and tools is great. I use OneNote. So I can go back to my very first conversation I ever had with one of my executive team members and go through the notes from that day forward until today. And every day throughout the day, as something comes up where I say, gosh, I need to talk to my CFO about something, I'm typing in notes so that I'm always ready if I happen to catch that person or in our regularly scheduled kind of meetings and things. So there's a very purposeful cadence I have around our executive team and our management team and some of the broader meetings that we have set up. Then in addition to that, I'm very fortunate to have a really good communicator who is our head of people and culture. And she has established a regular, along with our founder, to give him full credit for this, we have something we refer to as Zoomapalooza. So once a month, we fire off Zoomapalooza, and the entire company is invited to it. We share a series of important updates just around how the business is going, if anything important has occurred that we need to share. And throughout the month, our team is submitting information so that we can share not only the anniversaries of who's been with the company when, but birth dates and exciting things that people want to share with the entire company. We also have an online kind of social media tool in Yammer. So we have an ability to communicate real time and post anything real time. And then our teams, I believe, do a nice job of trying to keep people engaged. So whether it's around different holidays and we have different contests and we're posting pictures, or around sporting events like the Super Bowl and how we're doing trivia around those things, it's really an active environment around communication on how you got to be purposeful about it, and then two, you got to execute and do what you say you're going to do. So there's a lot that goes into it, a lot of cadence, a lot of different channels, and it's forever evolving.
One of the things that I think about sometimes when I hear about approaches that organizations use is whether they're measuring, whether they're doing anything to evaluate the effectiveness of any of these channels or these approaches. Do you do anything like that? I'm curious. I'm trying to get a sense about, from, and not just yourself, I've been speaking to other leaders as well about how they measure the effectiveness of their messages.
Yeah, So individual messages are difficult to measure, but I would say there are a series of ways that we're able to measure this, and some of the things that we're evolving around and getting better at, and some of the things that we're really good at. At the end of the day, there is one, in my mind, there's one easy measure, and that's what's your retention rate. Because trust me, if people don't like how you're communicating, or they don't like the vision of the company, or they don't like their management team, or whatever it might be, if you have a steady flow of people out the door,
they vote with their
feet.
Pretty
good. It's a pretty good measurement, right? So one is just simply, what's your retention rates? What's your voluntary versus involuntary number of people that are leaving the business? Because we all know, if there's a heavy level of churn in your business, it's very difficult to be successful in probably almost anything that you do. So that's one. Two is, to the extent that you can do internal employee satisfaction surveys and things, I really do believe in those, especially if you provide an opportunity for people to provide some free form feedback in text. The scoring is good. The words at times can be even better. Those are some of the main ways I would say that we really score, and we have some quantitative pieces around what we do. But I do think that there is, if you've got some empathy and some emotional intelligence and you're willing to listen, you can also hear how the culture is working within a business. So I'm a big proponent of town halls. Now, how do you do town halls when you're in a business that's like ours, that's totally remote? We literally set up town halls. If I'm going to a city, maybe to visit with a client, and we have a large group of employees that might work in and around that city, we'll pull together a town hall in that city, rent out a room in a restaurant or at a hotel or something to actually have some face-to-face time. We conduct them virtually with smaller groups of teams to be able to participate. And while I'll give a little bit of a State of the Union in those communications, really it is about me having the opportunity to be quiet and ask for people's feedback on how things are going, as well as with the rest of our executive teams and others who participate. And those are incredibly valuable means of getting the feedback. Is it measurable? It's measurable for me in terms of being able to see how the conversation changes over time. Because if you have challenges in the basics, how you're paying people, what your benefits are, how they feel about the business, you're going to hear those types of items right off the bat. And you'll hear them kind of universally, is what I've found. Once you're able to address those types of items, it is amazing to see how quickly the feedback I start to receive is more around, how do we make our performance better? I do this certain role. If we could just put in this type of technology, I could go twice as fast as what I do today. Or I think this thing's going to be a concern for a client. Maybe we should address this now. Those aren't maybe quantifiable things, but it is the feel that you just then get from the business around, everybody wants to do a good job. Everybody wants to be successful. And people will start to share with you the things that you can do to improve your business that you'll never get if you don't stop and listen.
It can be lonely at the top, right? I mean, let's face it. It's great to communicate with the team and the organization and all that. But ultimately, you're the one leading the organization. And ultimately, you have to make a decision of which direction or strategy to follow or present to the board, whoever that may be. And those decisions weigh heavily on you, on your shoulders.
Or they may be unpopular.
Or they may be unpopular. Many times it can be. How do you manage that moment of, I wouldn't say loneliness, but, I don't know, fully owning it, because there's a lot.
We could do a whole session just on this topic as
sure.
well. Well, actually, I can make it pretty quick. A lot of people might not know this, but when you become a CEO, the next morning you wake up and you have all of the answers. It is awesome. It is really great.
It happens to me all the time.
Quite different. And I think we all go through this in our careers. As you have the opportunity to move through your career, as you get a promotion, it doesn't mean that you wake up the next morning, you've kind of figured it all out. I have been very fortunate in my career that I have had great mentors, and I've had just the support of a lot of people, along the way. I've also been purposeful in seeking, some of that out. And I joke about waking up the first morning after being named president or CEO, and you figure it all out. But when I did become president for the first time, one of my board members approached me And he said, I've got this organization that I'm a part of. I really think that if you joined it, it would help you as well. And it was this organization called Young Presidents Organization, or YPO. And so YPO is a group of CEOs and presidents from companies all around the world, literally. And it provides you an opportunity to talk and help and support one another. But I got to tell you, joining YPO was probably one of the most intimidating moments of my life, to now be surrounded by other highly successful people that I wanted to be like and I wanted to be accepted by, as well. And then a magical thing kind of happened. And that was we get together in smaller groups called forums, at least in YPO. And I belong to YPO. I belong to a group now called Vistage, which is very similar. But I went to my first forum meetings and I realized we were all just people. We all didn't have all of the answers and we all suffered from fear and from self-doubt and from the concerns of sitting in the chair. And trust me, none of that is a woe is me. I wouldn't trade what I get to do every day in my life for anything. I love what it is. And I'm certainly not a CEO looking for sympathy or anything else. And so please don't take any of it from that way. But it is hard to know who can you talk to, right? When you're the top of the company, you got to be figuring some of this stuff out. It's difficult to know where to go find answers and who to trust to talk to on certain things. So, now I'm part of this group called Vistage. It's similarly a group of CEOs that get together regularly. And I find it so powerful in getting together with, this is a wonderful group of professionals, men and women that are CEOs and presidents of their company. And it's interesting because we don't just talk about our business or just talk about some of those topics. We actually also talk about our life. We talk about our health, and we talk about our business, because all of those things are so interconnected in what we do. And I know that we all show up not wanting anything from each other. Like if you show up and you want to sell something to somebody else, that's a direct ticket to getting kicked out. It's really about showing up to and not wanting something from somebody else, being willing to share, asking for help if you need it, and genuinely wanting to help out each one of these other members that are part of this. So, I really believe that wherever you are in your career, I highly recommend that you find a group or find a coach or find a mentor to help you. I know for me, I can't begin to describe how much I know I've grown and benefited from being these parts of these types of groups. Not to mention the parties and events are pretty unreal as well. I'm kidding, but no, honestly, having a mentor, being a part of a group. When you're a CEO, or I think in many levels, a key contributor in some way is really important. And I've significantly benefited from getting to be a part of these other people's lives and being able to talk about some of these things.
I suspect that one of the things that organizations like, Young Presidents Organization or Vistage, they do is that they help you to see that you're not alone, right? I'm curious, however, a little bit about, some of the things that are on, CEOs' minds. So, and part of why I asked this question is because, we over the last few episodes have been talking about everything from the supply chain problems to the Great Resignation to, the inflation rate to unemployment. Without, divulging anything that you shouldn't, give us a sense, if you will, of what, leaders like yourselves are being kept up at night about, that maybe are a little bit more general than say, for example, what's happening in your particular industry.
Yeah. Well, there's a big question there as well. I don't know that a lot of times there's anything that is really challenging CEOs that at some level challenges all of us, right? What's going on in the world? What's going on with social media? What's going on with new technologies? What's going on with the stock market? And why did Bitcoin drop 50%, right? There's some basic level of all of that that I think that we all deal with. But in particular for me, I'm always kind of asking myself a series of questions around things like, how do we continue to grow the business? So is our messaging correct? Are we delivering the services and solutions that the market wants to buy? Are we able to describe our differentiators in the market? So one is kind of growth. The next is, how efficient are we? Are we able to use automation to the greatest extent that we can? Our most valuable, and I hate to say asset, but it's kind of how we think of it, is our people. So do we have our people working on the most important things that we can have them working on? And do I have technology doing the pieces that I don't want such a valuable asset in our people tied up on? Our people, how are they doing? Are people happy? Are we doing the right thing when it comes to benefits, when it comes to our communication, all of those, sorts of items? Technology. There are technologies that we talk about today, blockchain, augmented reality, virtual reality, all types of things that, is the metaverse going to be real or not? What does that thing mean? But the way that I structure it inside of our company is there a competitor working on something right now that's going to make me obsolete? And so are we pushing the boundaries on technology to the extent that a company of any of size can absorb, can pay for, all of that? And kind of all of those areas and items roll up to this idea of value creation. Does this business as an entity continue to grow in value? What's the best way that we get there? So those are some of the things that kind of top of mind for me that I'll find myself watching a football game and drifting off thinking about, are we doing the right communication on this sales deal or whatever?
So just one or two things is what you're saying.
Yeah. No, it's easy. I take breaks all the time.
Yeah. No, that is fantastic. Jayson, we want to be cognizant of your time. We thank you for your time. But before we part ways, we always like to ask senior executives such as yourself, if you were to talk to Jayson, I don't know, when you're 25 or so, what advice would you give, a younger version of Jayson?
There are a few things I would say to younger Jaysons for sure, and I'll keep it to three. Although I know I can have a much longer list. So here are three. Have the difficult conversations. I'll tell you, my greatest regrets, business or in life, probably are when I didn't have the difficult conversation until it was too late. In our Vistage group, we actually have a saying, and I apologize because I don't remember where it came from, or what speaker brought to us or what have you. So I apologize for that. But we'll often remind each other that everything you want in life is on the other side of a difficult conversation. So have those difficult conversations is one. Two, don't be afraid even to ask out loud, what if I'm wrong? And to especially ask that question, what if I'm wrong, about the things that you feel deepest and strongest and most confident about, because those are often the things that you've got the blinders on of potentially being wrong. And I found that asking that question really helps me to be a better, well-rounded person anyways, and to take other people's considerations into think about how other people are addressing something. And then lastly, and for me, this has been something that I've really had to work on growing over time, and that is be vulnerable. That strength and deep relationships and things really grow at times out of letting go or acknowledging when you need help or when you don't know something. And that's something like Vistage and these groups have really helped to teach me, is that in those moments of being vulnerable is actually when the greatest growth takes place and when the best relationships are built. So I'd go back and tell younger me it's okay to go do these things.
Great advice.
I tell him, hey, you're going to do great. But don't let it go to your head. Well, fantastic. Jayson, thank you so much. I mean, we always love having people like yourself on the Business Fusion podcast because, our viewers and our listeners learn so much. We learn so much, right? We're able to, make sense of the things that have been floating around in our heads for a long time as well. I can certainly attest to the fact that you've validated some of my own thinking about what senior leaders go through, as an HR professional, as an executive coach, and so on and so forth. And I appreciate that. Thank you for being so frank about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, so thank you, Philip. Thank you, Carlos. It's great to see you again. I miss working with you, buddy. That was a great experience for me. Thank you both for hosting this podcast and for including me. I really appreciate both of you. I really appreciate the audience. So thank you so much. It was a great experience.
Fantastic. If people want to learn more about your company, if they want to learn more about you, what do you recommend?
RSource.com is the easiest way to go look for the company. And I welcome anybody who wants to connect on LinkedIn with me. Is the easiest way oftentimes to connect with me, or the initial J and then Yardley at RSource.com. Feel free to reach out. So happy to connect.
That sounds wonderful. Jayson, once again, thank you for the time. Folks, please like, comment, subscribe. It's been another episode, Business Fusion. And until next time, be good and do good. Take care.